Welcome to the SMEFocus show powered by MTDCNC. I'm Mark Weymouth from the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. I'm your host this week to highlight an aspect of UK manufacturing and in particular SMEs. My guest today is David Savage, who coaches people in mindset and overcoming mental blockages. He's the founder of the consultancy Manufacturing with Purpose. David also coaches on a topic very close to my heart, lean manufacturing. Hi, David.
Hi, Mark. Great to be with you today.
The joys of the technology we've been battling so far, but let's see how we manage to go. Cheers. Talking technology by a tenuous link, let's kick off by talking about the fact you did a degree at Bristol in mechanical engineering. So can I ask where your interest in engineering and manufacturing came from originally? What's your very distant background?
Sure you can. But before I answer that question, I just want to thank you on the record for your sterling work with the Friday Good News posts. They are like clockwork. They're a big highlight for me. And I think it's great that you're telling people some of the great stuff which is happening. And engineers can tend to talk about what's not going well, be a bit more pessimistic. But I love your messages. So I want to publicly thank you for that, Mark. You're doing a great job, and it does give me a boost, and many people as well. So thank you.
That's very
what got me into engineering? I've always had a love of making stuff, dismantling stuff. As a little kid, I was fixing stuff, more breaking than fixing, I think, taking apart. If your toaster broke or the washing machine, then that was all good game for me to like break it down into its bits and see how it all worked. And so that was kind of pretty much from a child. I've been like that. And I was from a big family. So, making stuff, even I remember like flipping the bikes upside down and using the back wheel to create like apple juice from an apple tree in the garden, so you're kind of getting into like mechanization and stuff like that. Was quite in my blood, I would say, and the enjoyment of seeing processes work and automation has been with me. I haven't worked hard to get that, so that's probably where it was all born. And so I felt like my future was one of these kids who pretty much knew I wanted to do something which was about making stuff, which was design or making. So I knew that fairly early on. So I was probably consider myself lucky that I knew what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess no surprise then that you started off by going and playing with some big train sets, in that you started, I think your first job was project manager at BAE Systems for 5 years back in the noughties, and then manufacturing manager at a sheet metal processing business. And then, I love my puns. So you spent 7 years, a sparkling 7 years working for De Beers Diamonds business. So 17 years, I think, in manufacturing, if my maths is right. So tell us a little bit about that, where you did, what you learned, what you enjoyed, and obviously only optimistic accounts of that.
Yeah, yeah, right. No, I feel myself very lucky for what I've done. BAE Systems is a gigantic company, defense company. When I started, it was 10,000 people in the UK, so it was a
Wow.
mega. And I was working with ammunition and operational analysis and future design, quite a lot of high tech at the sort of forefront. But I also got involved in manufacturing there. Probably one of the more interesting things which probably shaped my career was doing a site closure. So I was working with the site closure team and transferring process and production to another site. And we were looking at how to get there was no people transferring, but there was a very delicate bulk processing transfer going on. And we were trained in how to take out the tacit knowledge, the knowledge which isn't written down about the process. How do you transfer that to another site? Yeah. So I was getting into, even in that early stage, some of this invisible part of engineering, which people don't really, it's harder to get your teeth into. You can't write it down in a specification. For example, what happens if you run at over spec, or if you mix a different ingredient, or if a supplier is asking a question, are we able to increase or decrease a certain parameter of the mix? How do you answer that question? That's kind of expert knowledge. And where do the process is fine whilst it runs exactly how you did it, but it's never going to be exactly the same. There'll always be equipment changes and raw material changes, and how do you know if that's going to affect things? So it was a really interesting experience in how to take that out of an expert and what questions you should ask to bring out that hidden knowledge. And so I suppose I'm pointing towards where I've gone now with my career, kind of out of like I suppose like nuts and bolts engineering into more the people side. I brought my net, and then so I was in a mega there, and I really felt I was a little bit like a small cog in a very big machine, and I wanted to be more, I wanted to feel like I was really adding value, So I mean, you can absolutely add value in a big company, but it's huge. So I went from that big company into a company of 30, and that was proper SME manufacturing. You could see exactly the impact of every decision you made on what went out the door of the factory, and you were first name terms of everyone in there. So it's like really I suppose the cut and thrust of manufacturing is how it's, and I wanted that. I sought out that experience, very different, and I think I really learned properly about manufacturing there. And thanks very much to a supplier, we were supplied into a large company, and they had a supplier development program where they would take the supplier, show them around their site, teach them about lean, teach them about value stream mapping and this kind of thing, which was how I got into lean. I was never formally trained in lean. It was done through through a supplier development program, which is a genius way of decreasing cost in a company. It's like work with your suppliers, help them to be more efficient. And often the smaller companies don't have they don't have a continuous improvement department. It's all kind of, people are doing this as a part-time job, and the bigger the supplier may have more resources to be able to support them, and we had this system of sharing cost down benefits. So it's really nice. I don't hear it too often, but I think it's a really good system. So that was how I got into lean, I suppose, and obviously that's a subject which you're really keen into. I think for the listeners in the terms of CNC, unusually, and you wouldn't expect this in the what did you call it, the sparkly world of diamonds. So actually, that's where I got more involved in CNC, like more traditional machining, because of course polycrystalline diamond is used to tip tungsten carbide tooling for certain applications. If you abrasive plastics or ceramics and so on, PCD is a tool as technology which is used. And we were actually testing synthetic diamond which is made by in the lab, if you like, in manufacturing. We're testing that for its abrasive properties. So we had a number of lathes set up and were machining difficult things in order to test the wear resistance of diamond. So at that point, I was doing supervising classic machinery operations, and the value stream was about creating data points. So we weren't creating a part; we were basically creating swarf. But what we're creating then is data on how long these tips can last and under what conditions they kind of perform best and so on. So that's the connection to CNC. So I'm sure some of your listeners will be using that kind of tooling in their work, and that's something I really appreciate, the skill of the CNC machinist, both in terms of understanding or getting the visual signals back from the swarf, what's that telling you, and there's so much technology packed into machining. It's wonderful to see it.
Okay, interesting. So a very diverse sort of range of customers and roles, and really sort of opened your mind. And I think you're an interesting engineer, should we say, in that you're very people focused, and that's obviously often a challenge for the engineering community. So 7 or so years ago, while you were still working within manufacturing, you also founded a coaching business, which is Manufacturing with Purpose. What prompted that? Do we call it a pivot? Do we call it a diversification? I'm not sure, but tell us really
Midlife crisis.
what came about, what prompted you to do it. Midlife crisis, whatever you wanted to call it.
Yeah. So I always wanted to have something of my own that has been there for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And also I was seeing that the trajectory of progression in a large company was quite linear. Like I could see, I said, in 10 years time, what will I be earning? And do I want to keep doing this for another 10 years? And for me, the answer was no. I need to think more. I need to think differently about how I do my career. So those two things came together at the same time: a need for like increasing my income and a sense that at some point I want to do something of my own. And interestingly, and it's interesting how sometimes things happen by accident rather than by design. I was requested to help a friend of mine who was doing a coaching qualification. Says, will you be my guinea pig client? So I was coached. First of all, like, what is this coaching thing? It's like, well, whatever, I'll be in. It wasn't completely free. I think I paid £10 for like an hour of this guy's time. So it was professional. And it really worked for me. It was like a game changer. And at that time, it was about how do I'd have, I've got 4 boys and busy life. I do work with charity and so on. So it's like quite a lot going on. And with all these plates spinning, I was just like, I'm not getting any traction here. And so having time to reflect and time to think about what I'm trying to actually achieve here, slowing down a bit was a game changer for me. So, I completely get why people are skeptical about coaching. I was that skeptic, but through first-hand experience, it did shift my experience, and then I realized this is really good. And fast forward this, I began to start using coaching techniques in my work and being more interested in this. And then I decided, actually, I'm working with people. This is what I like doing, So I actually signed up and did training outside of my work. I did put my own money into my training for coaching, and gradually started building up a client base alongside my full-time job with the blessing of the HR manager, I will add. So that was really good. They said, this is something which is important to you. As long as it doesn't conflict, then you can do that. And then in 2020, I started full-time coaching.
Wow. Interesting. And it sounds like you were very lucky to have that agreement of support from, we all joke about HR. Perhaps they saw you as a bit of a kindred spirit, as somebody who was interested in people. And it sounds key to doing that transition and getting the experience, I guess, also before going for broke and doing it full time. So, wow.
I think it's a good. It's just to add to that point, Mark. I think it's a really. It's worthwhile thinking about that people will have. I might have gone down that and found that it wasn't for me, but I felt I was more committed to the company because they were supporting me as an individual. And that is what my experience is. People work hard for a manager who is committed to them. So the company does gain from taking that gamble that people could be abusing this setup. So I was really grateful. I had forward thinkers in that company who believed in me and wanted to support me.
For their colleagues as well. So not just the improvement in your commitment to the company, but how others saw you being given an opportunity and therefore thought, well, this is a good organization. So I think the value is beyond just the one person who's treated fairly in whatever role that is, whatever thing. So that's interesting. So you talked about the coaching you received, which was juggling all those plates, which is something we can definitely relate to. And I know that you now coach people on mindset and overcoming mental blockages, so which obviously is about them achieving more and hitting their potential. Can you tell us more about that and explain coaching to us?
Yeah, so coaching is how can I best describe it? Coaching is about helping someone who is motivated. Generally, they are motivated for something. They may even know where they want to go, but they want someone who can support them on that journey. So it's not mentoring, and it can often get blended with mentoring. A mentor is someone who has gone the way in front of you and can give you advice, can give you support, and there's absolutely a need for that. Whereas coaching is very much guided by the client as to what outcome they want to get. So it's quite detached, and what you're helping someone there is explore their subconscious mind, because your subconscious is really powerful. That's the kind of those habits we go back to, and helping them work with those things which they know they are their own worst enemy. That's how I would often describe it. So it's not about getting advice. It's about how do I work with that, like what's going on inside which might be holding me back. So typically a coaching session for me would look like, what is it that your challenge at the moment, and where do you want to get to with that, and what have you tried, and what options have you got? So I would be the one who's asking lots of questions to kind of expand their thinking and take them to a different viewpoint, and then they would learn from that and be able to choose what they could do next. Typically there's like a homework you've got to follow up with, and they'll say, yeah, by next time I will do X, Y, and Z, and that gets them moving out of where they are. So it's a sort of a thought partner, is how the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, describe it as you're their thought partner in their project.
Okay. Are the I said probably a ridiculously difficult question, but are you able to describe the type of people that you work with, or maybe the type of change they're trying to bring about, or I don't know, any way of categorizing or explaining clients, people, objectives?
Yeah, I work with like high performers. Just going to say that it's not about fixing broken people. It's about people who are high performers, and often are very ambitious, and they may be frustrated with where they're getting now. So it's about people who are generally speaking, they are mid to senior managers. They have a team. They may own their company, or they may be within a company but have influence, and they are wanting to make changes. So I can't put that into someone. They want to make changes, and they are prepared to take responsibility for their actions. So this is like the alliance between the coach and the coachee, is that we're prepared to make changes. So if someone says, I'm the victim here, it's all being done to me, it's very hard to work with that kind of person. They need to take some responsibility for the results they're getting.
Okay, that's interesting. I think you managed to answer the question I was struggling to ask. So great.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Okay. A bit of a change of tack based on some other conversations and stuff. At the minute, I think post-budget, partly because of the audience of this show, maybe partly because my own bias have been very focused on automation, but automation is a particularly popular topic at the minute. And I guess there's a contradiction. People see automation as a way to remove jobs, or I guess a more people-centric way is to look at automation as a way to provide more engaging jobs for people. So can I ask you your thoughts on automation and what it can provide for people in a positive way?
Yeah, there's a lot of certainly on the shop floor, automation can be viewed as like the enemy of jobs. Like it's still, I mean, Germany has more robots than the per employee than the UK, and is a more successful manufacturing company. But they are they embrace automation. So it's like there's lots of evidence to show that automation doesn't take jobs out of the system, but it's still still held as a skeptical approach. So and it's worth just addressing that rather than assuming people should get this. And what I would see is with automation, you're trying to seek to remove some of the tedious jobs which people don't want to do anyway. If they're really honest, it might be comfortable, it might be stable, but it is boring, and that's a great time to bring in automation. And part of what my work is to bring manufacturing to life. And when we're doing something which is tedious and boring, it's, you know, it sucks some of that kind of life spirit out of us. So I think if you can get the workforce on board with that, is there a better way of having something which does this for us? And then we can be involved in something else. That's one part. And the other is by involving people in the process of adopting automation, they become an owner of it and want to make it work. And that's what you all know that, Mark. If people want to block a technology from happening, they can very easily do that. If they're not for it, they'll find all the reasons why this won't work and why the training's not right and why it won't handle all these different scenarios. Whereas if someone has been part of the acquisition process, they understand it, then they'll start saying, well, how can we solve this? What do we need to do? And that's exactly what you want to make a new technology stick and be successful. You need a workforce who want it to work. So again, we're talking hearts and minds. We're talking about making people part of the process and part of, you know, communicating well with the managers or with the, you know, engineers who think this is the best thing since sliced bread, you know, and perhaps just like machinery for the sake of machinery. That's not the same as everyone.
Okay. If I could ask you to maybe offer some advice based on your perspective through your manufacturing history, your coaching history and experience, if you could offer advice to an SME, what advice would you offer, or what questions would you ask them in first meeting?
I believe people are not aware of their potential. Yeah, so I often quote the Thomas Edison one, is that if we all did the things we were capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. And that's what I would explore with them. You know, what would be possible if the dream were to come true? What would that look like? And a willingness to explore what they actually really would want to do. And you know, it's amazing what is possible, but we can have this these blockers which come in and immediately shoot down the dream. And I would say that, you know, perhaps the stereotypical engineer can be good at coming up with objections. That's kind of how your brain works, and that's a great strength to make something really robust. But there is also a time to put on the dreaming hat, and there may be people in your organization who are more that way inclined, and I would say give them some airtime, give them some space, give yourself a bit of permission to dream and write that down and think about it, because perhaps it's closer than you think, you know. And it does take a daringness to put it out there. It does take courage. So I would say explore that. Manufacturing is a fantastic place. I think we do talk ourselves down. I think we can. You know, a lot of my clients will talk to me with self-esteem. You know, has a good, healthy self-image. And not telling yourself you're stupid. You're not stupid. You know, you have skills in this area, maybe not in this area, but you do have skills in this area. How can you capitalize on that? You know, what would that, if you could play to your strengths, what would you be? How can you work for your weaknesses, so that they don't hold you back? And that's what I would say, is there is so much potential, and it's up to us to breathe life into it, give it people space, encourage people. And I feel I have got the best job because I just remind people of how brilliant they are, you know, because people are brilliant. Yeah. Much more brilliant than automation, Mark. Just so you know, I mean, automation's great,
Okay.
but the human brain is phenomenal. What it can do, what it can process and stuff, it's brilliant at certain things, So we should respect it, and we should respect what we are capable of.
Oh, I'm totally with you. I've always said, to be fair, automation is pretty boring. It's what people do with it that excites me.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about sort of audacious goals, dreams, striving for bigger things, limitless ability. Well, the last question of these sessions is also to ask what you've got planned for the next 12 months. So we're based on your recommendations to aim big and plan big. What have you got planned for 2025, and what are your hopes?
I like that question, Mark, and it's good to have it on record. My vision is to bring manufacturing to life. I think that's something which I have got a solution to, but I know I won't be able to do that alone. There's 2.5 million people in this sector. Some people say to me it's niche. I say, well, there's a lot of people here. If once you're in it, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of lifting up what I've just spoken about there, lifting people up. So my work in 2025 is to engage the engagers. It's to get people who think like this, to give them support. And I'm offering a 1 hour complimentary coaching session to people who feel inspired about that, because I just want to, honestly, it gives me a huge boost to know that people are being feeling good about what they're doing. I'm also writing a book for this person, which will be called Heart of Steel: Thriving as a People Person in Manufacturing. So that's one of my 2025 projects, is to independently publish that book and be able to give that to
Okay.
people who I know who buy into this thinking. That's going to take some commitment. We're all busy, and writing is hard to find, carve out time for that. So, but I've committed to doing that, and I've committed to growing my business. And as the business grows, that is an indication that more people are being engaged. So that's just the flavor, Mark, of some of my dreams. I do events, and my dream is to have an award ceremony where people who have really thrived, who have kind of bucked the trend, who moved up, are celebrated. That really gives me a lot of pleasure to see how someone who was perhaps plateauing and perhaps disillusioned, perhaps lost their mojo, how they regain it and achieve something wonderful. I'd love to celebrate that in some way, because you will have seen people like that who have like surprised you of what they were. Everyone said nothing will become of them, and then you suddenly see them doing amazing stuff, and I think that should be celebrated. And it is a team effort, so they will have coaches, they will have people who believed in them, they obviously worked hard themselves. So I think we should celebrate that. So I'm building up towards this award ceremony, and bit by bit. So the starting point of that is to have more celebration for that kind of success in manufacturing. So I've got 3 events this year, and those will be all flavored with that kind of feel. Yeah.
Okay, it's certainly like the kind of awards party that I think anybody'd want to come to, and I emphasise the word party because it sounds like it would be an interesting gathering of happy people. Cool. So wrapping up, can I ask, how do people go around finding you, and how do people go around contacting you?
So LinkedIn is a pretty good place to start, to be honest, Mark. That's where I talk about stuff. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you look up David Savage Coach and Manufacturing, you'll probably find me. My website is manufacturingwithpurpose, allconnected.com. And I'm sure you've got links in this podcast. So we'd be delighted to hear any of you guests. And if this is like, as I said, if this is something which you believe is important, your listeners think is important, then I will give you a complimentary coaching session to inspire you on your way, because it's something which I really am committed to doing.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, David. I will wrap up with the usual end of episode small print and say, if people would like to get in touch with the show with a comment, a suggestion, in particular if you'd like to appear in a future episode, please email us at inquiries@mtdcnc.com or contact myself, Stuart Whitehead, or Joe Reynolds. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. From me, Mark Weymouth, Plus Automation. Cheers. Have fun.